What's up, guys? This is Caroline here, back with my weekly Wednesday Live. This week I want to talk to you guys about what you should do if you're just venturing into the weight room for the first time. So just a little bit of backstory here. Like everybody else, I went into the weight room for the first time. I have not just been living there my entire life. And I, at the time, was pretty overweight. I was just starting to experiment with exercise and figure out what things felt good to me. Now, I did have a little bit of an advantage because I had taken some weight training classes in high school, so I sort of knew a little bit, but I still felt very out of place in a college weight room filled with all kinds of dudes lifting weight and making a bunch of noise, messing around with each other. I really felt like I stuck out. I felt like everybody was looking at me and judging me and thinking that I didn't belong there. And so it was a really intimidating experience. I can definitely relate to that feeling that I hear from a lot of new clients that I work with these days. But over time, obviously, I've grown to love the weight room, and there are a couple of things that helped me make this transition that I've used to help my clients that I want to share with you today. So there are kind of two parts to this. The first part is just knowing how to behave in the weight room, or understanding some weight room norms that'll help you feel a little more comfortable. And the second bit is knowing actually what to do when you go into the weight room. So just a little bit about norms, first of all. So something that I've learned over the years is that even though it seems like everybody in the weight room knows what they're doing, chances are very good that a lot of people are just as clueless as you are. They just seem a little bit more confident. So I encourage you to reframe your ideas about some people being so much better off and so much more knowledgeable than you. From my personal and professional experience, I can tell you that that's almost never the case. So you definitely belong in the weight room, and you're definitely not alone if you feel a little bit confused. The other thing is it can often feel like people are looking at you and watching you in the weight room, and in my experience, I think that most people are paying a lot of attention to themselves, watching themselves in the mirror, thinking about what they're doing, and they're paying very little attention to other people. So I would encourage you to just ignore other people and tell yourself that they're probably not really noticing you at all. They're probably not paying you much mind. So when you do go into the weight room, there are a few things that you can do to interact with people just to make your experience a little bit more comfortable. So first things first, if you go into the weight room and it's busy, it's all about taking up an appropriate amount of space and sharing, okay? So one thing that you can do if someone's using a piece of equipment that you want to use, you can go up to that person when they're done with their set and you can politely ask them to work in. And that basically means that you're going to take turns. You'll do one set and they'll do one set. This doesn't work as well if you're using like a barbell or something with a lot of weights and you're not at the same strength level as the other person, so it's a big hassle to unload and reload between sets. But if you guys are more or less doing the same thing, or you're just sharing off pairs of dumbbells and you need a bench or a machine, trading off is a good way to make the most of your time. Now, if the person does say no, that can be a little frustrating, but you can either just wait it out or you can choose another exercise. Kind of along the same route, it's definitely a little bit impolite for you to be taking up multiple pieces of equipment across a busy gym. So if you go in the gym and your plan gets a little bit foiled because certain parts of pieces of equipment are really far away from each other or they're all being used, I would just break up your training session a little bit different and make a little bit different exercise choice rather than hogging all of the equipment. One of my biggest gym pet peeves is when people are doing exercises in front of a dumbbell rack. It's typically because there's a mirror right there. But if you're gonna take a pair of dumbbells from the rack, I would pick the dumbbells up and I would take a few steps away. Just make sure you have enough space so that you feel comfortable and so you're not in anyone else's space and you're not blocking any major walkways and people can access all of the equipment. So just like most other social things you're doing in your life, just be polite and use common sense. Make sure that you're not invading someone's space and that you're being considerate of other people, and hopefully people will do the same for you. In my experience, that's usually the case. And then the last thing is just to pick up after yourself. So don't leave equipment lying all over the gym. And if you see other people doing it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay. I would try to set a better example. It's just safer and it's easier for people to figure out what equipment's being used and what's not being used rather than just having a bunch of random stuff all over the floor. So those are just a few kind of gym norms that you can keep in mind if you're venturing into the weight room for the first time. Now, when you do walk over to the weight room, let's say you have been reading or talking to people and you decided that you want to add some more strength training into your routine. How do you figure out what to do? It can be extremely overwhelming. There's so many things in the weight room, so many different exercises. There are a few things that I would prioritize. So first of all, I would start off doing a lot of body weight exercises, things like body weight squats, elevated push-ups, inverted rows, warm-up drills on the floor. Just make sure that you're able to move well before you go and pick up the heaviest dumbbell or heavy barbell or something like that. The next thing that I would use are dumbbells and kettlebells. So these are like the smaller individual weights. Not every gym will have kettlebells. Most gyms will have dumbbells, even if the dumbbell set is limited to like 50 pounds or 70 pounds. It's one of the most universal pieces of gym equipment. It's super versatile. You can train just about every single movement and muscle with dumbbells, and there's a lot of potential to gain strength. So that's where I would spend the majority of my time if I was just starting out. Some other things that I use a lot, I use the moving pulley cables. So this would be like where you see people doing the cable crossovers, or like standing rows and things like that. I like that for a lot of different pulling and core exercises especially. And it's also nice because it allows you to train in half kneeling and to train on the floor instead of only standing up, so you get a little bit of variety. One thing that new strength training trainees get a lot of mixed messages about are machines. So machines are often the first thing that people go to. It was the first thing that I went to when I started lifting weights because they're kind of self-explanatory. They're harder to mess up. They only move in one way typically, and they have instructions. So machines are a good way to get your feet wet. Now, a lot of quote-unquote functional fitness coaches will tell you that machines are not useful, that they are bad for your body, and I will argue that that's not true for a lot of new beginner trainees. So if you have no weight training experience, you don't have access to a coach, you want to get your feet wet, I would encourage you to try out some machines, but I would make sure that they feel okay. Like if it causes pain or feels really awkward, it's probably not a good choice for you. Especially if you're like super tall or super short, sometimes a certain machine just isn't built well for your body. But don't be afraid to try those things out to learn what it feels like to use certain muscles. That's a good beginning skill to have, especially if you don't have access to a coach. And then the last little bit of advice I would give you is I would stay away from barbells for a while if you're just starting out. So it's really tempting to like want to try out your barbell bench press or to throw a barbell on your back when you're doing squats, but those lifts are very technical, and that's not to say you can never do them. I mean, certainly you can work up to them, but I think you'll have more success down the road. You'll enjoy your workouts more now, and you'll have less risk of injury if you focus on the tools that I already mentioned rather than trying to learn the barbell. So you have plenty of time to do that. In your first like handful of months up to a year of training, if you never touched a barbell but you got progressively stronger using the other tools, you'll still get great results. So don't feel like you have to use a barbell, and it might even be a good idea to stay away from it. So what kinds of exercises should you do? So I definitely recommend choosing big compound movements. So compound movement is going to target lots of different muscles and lots of different joints. So something that would not be a compound movement would be a curl. In a curl, you're only using one joint, your elbow, and one muscle, your bicep. So you'll get a little bit more bang for your buck if you can do some bigger picture things like squats, rows. Rows are pulling exercises, upper body presses like push-ups, and then hip hinges. I have a blog post that I wrote, and I have a whole list with all kinds of videos of like my basic exercises that I like to use with people. I'll put a link to it in the comments, but if you can pick movements from those categories, again, that's upper body push, upper body pull, squat, and hip hinge, and use the tools that I mentioned before, practice getting stronger and moving well, you're gonna get good results that way. So how do you put all this together? So at a basic level, I think to get good results, you really should be able to commit to at minimum 2 strength training sessions a week. So these don't have to be long sessions. They can be as short as 20 minutes if you're crunched for time or you don't have the endurance or you don't want to spend that much time in the gym. As long as 60 minutes, I think if you're pushing 60 minutes and you're a beginner, then you probably are either being inefficient or you're doing a little bit too much. I don't really think it's necessary to do more than that. So that's where I would start. You could work up to 3 or 4 if you wanted to, but I think at least 2, maybe 3 at first is a good place to start. When you come into the gym, I would always do a warm-up. I like a lot of floor-based drills where you address primarily your hips, your upper back, and your shoulders. Those are the areas that tend to be the tightest with my clientele who typically work at a desk all day. So always do some sort of movement-based warm-up, not just a cardio warm-up, so that you're preparing your body to actually lift some weights. And then what I would do is I would maybe do a core exercise or 2. Again, I have a list of those in the blog post. And then I would do those strength exercises. I would pair them either in a big circuit of like 3 to 4 exercises or in a couple of supersets. A superset, you would do an upper body and a lower body exercise. You'd do them 2 or 3 times and then you'd move on to the next superset. With a circuit, you could do the whole thing 2 to 4 times depending on how much time you have. You can get really nitpicky with rep ranges and things like that, but as a good starting rep range, 8 to 12 I like a lot. I use that with a lot of my new clients. If you're wanting to build a little bit more strength and you feel more confident, you can keep the reps a little bit lower, maybe like the 5 to 8 range. In time, you can take that into both extremes, but I think that's a good place to start, either 5 to 8 reps or like 8 to 12 reps. And then at the end is when I would include any extra things you want to do, like cardio or high intensity interval training, any isolation work for your arms or calves or glutes or those kinds of things. They'll fit better at the end. So again, you can pick and choose from that list based on how much time you have, but the most important things are going to be those big compound exercises, primarily using body weight, dumbbells, kettlebells, and then maybe some machines to fill in the gaps. So just to summarize, so if you're considering adding more strength training into your routine and you're feeling a little bit intimidated, I encourage you just to get started. Most gyms are a lot less scary than they appear. In my experience, people are really involved in what they're doing. They're paying a lot of attention to themselves, and they don't really care as much about other people. I would encourage you to just go for it and find a corner of the weight room that feels comfortable for you and do whatever you can. And it's also helpful to have a plan of attack so you're not just wandering aimlessly around the gym. What I recommend is a full body workout, primarily using compound strength movements, staying away from barbells, but using a lot of the other tools in the gym. 20 to 60 minutes, 2 times a week at minimum, working up to 3 or 4 if you have time is a good place to start. So I know a lot of people don't have the time or the desire to write their own training programs. So what I've been working on and I'm going to be launching in September is a done for you training program. It's going to be a twice per week program with some opportunities to expand on that if you want to do more. But this will take all the guesswork out of training for you. So you can go into the gym, you'll have a program that's well put together. It's going to be efficient, it's not going to take you forever. And if you follow it progressively over the course of the 3 months, you'll definitely feel stronger, you'll probably look better, and you'll have built your confidence that you can go to the gym more consistently and see progress. So if you're interested in this, I'm going to be beta testing some of the workouts. I'm going to be sending them out to people beforehand just to get some feedback and see how they feel and flow at different gyms. So you can sign up. I have a waiting list. I'm linking to it in my Facebook post. If you're watching this on Instagram, I'll put a link in my link tree and you can sign up there as well. And as always, if you guys have questions about anything or if you want feedback on what you're doing, I'd love to hear from you. You can pop it in the comments or you can shoot me a DM. Thanks guys, have a good week.